when you feel things differently, especially when you complete a loop that you've been holding with dad for 40 years or something, there's a release of a lot of things that you haven't let yourself experience. So you feel all that, then you start seeing differently. You see yourself differently, like, oh my gosh, I thought it was this thing all along, this dynamic with my dad, but now I'm seeing it's really a different dynamic. I can't believe it.
So the four quadrants are the lover in the east, the south is the warrior, the west is the magician or shaman, and the north is the sovereign, king, queen, chief. And what we notice is like we can use these energies to know where we're either we have deficiency, where we have wounding, we can check in with ourselves. It's like a self model as well around these archetypal energies. I'm just curious, like if you could say a bit more about not just the facilitation piece, but the kind of internal compass that it can be.
Yeah, it is useful to have a way of thinking about problem in my life or something in terms of, okay, of these four energies, is this, what's the mix of these four energies in this problem? And we've done a lot of that. So for almost any problem a human being could bring to me, I could say, well, this is high in this one. This is high in sovereign energy, or right, and it's low in this other one. This particular problem happens to have that mix. And then that kind of opens up to me a bunch of theory I can use for that to say, well, here's probably how that person got wounded in this thing. And here's a little pathway that person could take to kind of incorporate this missing piece. People sometimes compare these four energies to the four tires on your car. Like if one of them's low, you got to pump it up a little bit to make the car run better, which is a lot of what we do. Without so much saying that energy over there is pure evil. You should just get rid of it. Like in our model, there isn't so much the good ones and the bad ones. There's just four of them. And any of them can be used for ill or for good. But we don't so much believe in there being cosmic evil energy, running things behind the scenes in the world. It's not God versus the devil.
Maybe it'd be helpful. I think this is really an important piece, right? Like the idea that there's no real kind of evil force in any part of a human's soul, right? It's like there's a basic goodness, but we can obviously do evil deeds, right? There's evil deeds, but there aren't necessarily evil parts of a human soul. In this model, like you've mentioned, like there's a virtuous aspect of, let's say, the warrior quadrant, and there's a harmful aspect or a maladaptive aspect of the warrior quadrant. Could you give a little bit of some examples of how that manifests?
So let's talk about the warrior quadrant. So let's talk about the part of us. This is genetically called our persistence genes. In other words, as an individual, whoever you are, as you listen to this, you have more or less persistence genes. You're either a really persistent person, there are a bunch of people like that, and there are folks who have trouble being persistent. They procrastinate, right? So this persistence, this warrior energy, which is also the part of us that has, as tribes that have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, went to war with the tribe next door. So this is the fight part. This is the combat part. This is the confront part, as well as the get her done part. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's take that energy, what we would call warrior energy. That can be unbelievably useful in someone's life if you know that in yourself and you know how to use it. We think everyone has that kind of energy. Everybody kind of has this power, whether they want to have it or not. Everyone has some. So if you have this power, maybe it's a good idea to learn how to use it. So what we do is, for folks who are having problems with their warrior energy, we set up symbolic spaces where they can work with it and act it out and learn it and see the good in it and realize how they might be able to shift it around, use it in a balance differently or something. So that warrior energy for me can come out as pretty clean boundaries with you. It can come out as a pretty healthy sense of myself. Like I know who I am, and as opposed to you, I have those personal boundaries. And this is what helps me deal with conflict if someone brings conflict to me, and this is what helps me really get stuff done, all that. So that can be used very constructively in my life. But of course, this can become, when it's what we say brought out of shadow, which means you're not aware that this energy is moving in you. You haven't worked with it. It just comes through you sometimes, like when you lose your temper. Like when you scream at your kids, like when you throw something at your partner, like when when this warrior energy just comes out. Of course, that does terrible damage in the world, all kinds of violence, all kinds of persecution, all kinds of dominance, setting up hierarchies around the world. I mean, that all comes out of this energy too. So the same energy, we think, can be used for good or for ill. And so we try to work with people to, have a lab to explore that energy in themselves where they can't do any harm to anyone. A good analogy for this is to say that despite the fact that we wish there were fewer guns, everyone actually has a gun. It's this anger energy. And if you have one, maybe you should learn how to use it and hit what you're aiming at and not everything else. So we often work with it in this way, like we set up these ritual firing ranges for people's warrior angry energy. So they learn how to use the thing and hit what they're aiming at, which is usually someone's behavior. If I'm mad at you and I'm going to bring out all my warrior energy, I want to hit the behavior. I don't want to hit your soul. I don't want to hit your self-esteem. I want to hit your behavior. But to do that, I have to know how to aim the thing. So I actually hit what I'm aiming at, and not a shotgun where I hit your self-esteem and your soul and our relationship and all this other stuff too. And the place to learn how to shoot a gun is not on the street. What a bad idea. If you're in any profession that has a sidearm, you have to go to a rifle range, gun range, and practice that thing all the time if you're going to be allowed to use it for real, that kind of force. We say same thing with your warrior energy, with your anger. You can learn how to use that better.
Oh, wow. What a powerful metaphor for this. And I'm curious, working it out, the ritual firing range here, right? Like, can you describe for those that don't know shadow work? I think a lot of people do. A lot of people that are listening to this show probably do, because this work is just so out there in the world. And even the phrase shadow work now is just kind of like, it's just in the zeitgeist, right? And so thank you. Thank you for that contribution, a significant one. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about, like, if someone was watching a shadow work process, what would that working it out look like? What would the ritual firing range, so to speak, look like? What would we be seeing?
Well, just so that this can be clearly understood by your listeners, if someone comes to shadow work to watch something like this, we're going to go through about 4 hours of setting up with them the way we do this, so people understand what we're doing and they understand what we're not doing. In other words, we're setting up a symbolic space that does not have real world consequences and is not real in any way. Right?
No real guns at a shadow work weekend.
Guns. Right. Okay. One of the ways we do that, let's say someone's having an issue with their dad. Let's say their dad was really mean to them and hit them a lot or something. Right. So we will ask someone to set out another part player. We'll do some role playing. So we get dad out there, but first we have to make it clear to whoever the main person is that this figure of dad out here in this space is their tape recording of their dad. It's not their dad. It's their tape recording of their dad.
That lives in their own body, mind, that lives in their ear. They're constantly, these are the voices that we hear, that we beat ourselves up about, or we have these kind of, again, maladaptive views of ourself, essentially, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yes. In therapy, they would call that a parental introject. Like they've taken in this projection. It's not a projection out, it's a projection in, right? And they have this, dad's always saying, you're not good enough, you'll never get there, I can't believe in you, you're worthless. Dad's saying all these horrible things, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we set it up where someone can bring up their warrior energy. We help them get angry. We have people hold them. We have them get really mad at dad and just go off on dad in all the ways they ever wish they could have for real, but couldn't. Just get that energy out. Get it going, right? Go ahead, trash dad. I don't care what you do with dad. Throw things on him, suffocate him, bury him, do whatever you want to do with dad. All played by role players, all set up so no one can get hurt, either physically or psychologically in that space, so that now the person gets to just finally do what they wish they could have done with their dad, right? I want to smack him over the head with a frying pan and throw him out the window. Okay, good. We can set that up. So we get them set up to exercise all of that in a purely symbolic way. And at the end of that, they're often in this place where, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did it. And what that does, the emotions and the hormones, particularly the stuff in the brain that gets going when you let yourself be really angry, is very ancient, very primal, and very informative. So oftentimes that person will get into that place, and then suddenly they'll feel different. I mean, that's what everybody would call a breakthrough in any kind of personal growth seminar, right? They have the breakthrough. What that breakthrough is there's different hormones flooding through them as a result of the actions they've been taking. The hormones are kicking up all kinds of different stuff in them. And when you feel things differently, especially when you complete a loop that you've been holding with dad for 40 years or something, there's a release of a lot of things that you haven't let yourself experience. So you feel all that, then you start seeing differently. You see yourself differently, like, oh my gosh, I thought it was this thing all along, this dynamic with my dad, but now I'm seeing it's really a different dynamic. I can't believe it. Wow. One of the biggest ones for a lot of people is to understand, okay, my dad was not this God figure in my life that had to do everything right for me. My dad was a human being, and he really had problems, and he was doing the best he could probably. Or, I mean, things come that you would not expect out of this energy. So people, they sort of rewrite their version of their history or their version of their relationship with dad. Or so it gives you a chance to, from a way, we would say a way more enlightened place. So what we're always looking for is both this emotional shift and then this shift in perception that someone can get where they can just see their whole relationship with their dad differently. I did a process like that. One of the first pieces I ever did was with my dad, right? And then they had me killing him off, and he kept coming back to life, and I had to kill him again. And they really had me do it a bunch of times with this person who's playing my dad. I wasn't really killing anyone. But after I did that the first time, I went home, and my dad, with whom I'd had a very difficult relationship all my life, we sat down and talked. Man, it made a huge difference in me because I'd blown off a lot of the old stuff around my dad, and it had morphed into a way more productive stance with him.
Yeah. Wow. What a beautiful, powerful story. I think back about the first time that I did a process like this, and it was about kind of feeling like a zombie walking through life, right? Like just really kind of dead inside, not a lot of meaning. And it was very much one of these kind of warrior processes that you talk about, and tracing it back to the origins of being bullied as in middle school, and how that kind of shut me down energetically, emotionally, spiritually. And I just remember the end of like busting through kind of a gauntlet of people that were holding me back. And that feeling that you're describing at the end of like, I did this, I shed this, and standing in a sense of full power and feeling just all the flood of emotions and the energy flying through the body and all sorts of new thoughts, and sometimes no thoughts at all, more of just an electric tingle in your body, right? And from that place, there's an opportunity really to kind of, I think the neural pathways are open in a different way where we can start to repattern the stories we tell about ourselves and who we are and our belief about ourselves. And often we come out with some sort of like pretty potent statement about who we believe ourselves to be from that place. And for me, those statements have become the way that I've evolved over time. Like when I start to feel low energy, like a bit of dead inside, I remember that I thrive. As a human, I'm a thriving human. Or if I find myself in a place of shame, these statements come up about like my worth as a human and who I truly am. And over time, I think these statements, these kind of mantras, these affirmations are one of the ways that we actually shift these maladaptive patterns into something that is fuller expression of who we are.